Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenmara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho, and tonight is our ongoing series called Myth and Tarot. And in general, this is where we'll go over a person or a creature from mythology and then do a tarot reading, but this particular evening, as you can tell by the title, its origin and lead up to the 12 labors of Hercules. So I'm going to go over Hercules' early life, not in-depth research or analysis, because being a demigod, there's a lot of random stories out there, but we'll get an idea of how he came into existence, and kind of give us a setup as to why Hera hates him so much. And this is just a part one, so we're going from birth up through the 12 labors according to the most common vein of thought. There are a lot of variances, especially when we go from Greek into Roman myths. So we've got a lot of information we can play with. I'm going to try as much as I can to stick to the Greek. There's a couple of spots, and I'll point those out, where we vary a little bit with some later 5th century BC up through 100 or so AD variables that different aspects of stories. But for the most part, we're going to stick to the main Greek origin story, and then in part 2, which will be in a couple of weeks, we will go over the rest of Hercules, because there's so much here. I don't think we'll do a part 3. I'm hoping not. Part 2 might be a little bit longer just because there's a ton of information, and what my goal is with this is not to go over every specific detail in his life, but give a broad range of why he was so important to the Greeks as part of their myth and lore, and why he's still showing up today in our stories and our entertainment. And I've linked some of the entertainment that I've personally enjoyed in the links in the description down below. It's the Legend of Hercules from back in the 90s, and if you're a 90s kid, it was Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, and Xena Warrior Princess. Those were the things to watch. And then there's a couple other Hercules stories. One of them actually has Steve Reeves, the old bodybuilder, in there, which is a really good one too. If you just want the old cheesy, which were fun movies, that's a good one to watch. So those are in the description if you're interested. Anyway, we're gonna hop on over, and so I have some explaining to do for myself. This particular episode, because of how I went over the labors of Hercules and the creatures involved, they were not in complete order. So the Ladon dragon and the apples of Hesperides, which would be the last, would be labor 11. We already went over the Ladon dragon. You can check it out in previous episodes. And then the other one was Cerberus and the capture by Hercules, bringing him out of Tartarus. And I've already went over Cerberus as well. So we're kind of coming to the conclusion of Hercules and his labors. But what I would like to do now is go over, why did Hercules have to perform said 12 labors in the first place? Since we've went all over the 12 labors, we went over all the creatures and the tasks and the disgusting cleaning out troughs and such, and stables. Let's find out why this all was instigated in the first place. So with that, let's hop into the past Wayback Machine here and explore how this whole mess started in the first place. Best way to start a story is at the beginning. So Hercules is conceived, but we're not going to go into his philandering father's personal life. That's a tale for a different episode, or many episodes. But I will say this. Zeus found a specific young Greek woman, and I'm going to try really hard with this name, Alcmene, and she found her to be very beautiful, and he fell heavily in lust with her beauty. there's only a little hiccup here, which tends to be the case for Zeus. Alcmene was already married. Of course she was. But no worries. Zeus being Zeus, he waited until hubby went away to war, apparently, and while he was gone, he went into Alcmene's bed, disguised as said husband. And there is a little bit of lore and some questionable things that go on here. One of which is that Zeus actually had one of the goddesses of time stop the world for 3 solid days, so it would stay that one night. So he could honestly say he was only with her for one night. You can't blame me for what happens in one night. Sure thing there, Zeus. And anyway, Zeus is a hyper fertile god, and we'll discuss his antics later. But Alcmene actually did fall pregnant because of this. And I just came to an understanding of this recently as I was researching through the labors. Alcmene got pregnant not only with Hercules, which was Zeus's son, but while Zeus's baby was gestating, or maybe first hubby was, before he left, already had an egg bun in the oven. Basically, when Zeus got with her, it set into motion a very interesting series of events, which was basically she already had one embryo, and when Zeus popped in and dropped his gift, it created a set of twins, and their only connection is by mother. So Hercules was born with what I would call a non-paternal twin. So it's a same mother, 2 different dads, which there's something to try to explain to somebody. Good luck with that. Anyway, but here's the other problem, and this is where we get into some of the reason that Hercules got into his labors. Zeus wasn't single either. Zeus was married to a very angry, apparently, for what happens to her, she gets very angry. I won't fault her entirely. What she does with her anger is not healthy, but how she came to it was honest. His wife, Hera, who I call Hera the Angry, found out about this particular affair, which was not one of his first ones, but this one, for some reason, really set her off. So she goes after Alcmene, and Hera vowed to not allow this child to be born by any means necessary. And of course, being a Greek story, we have some drama. Hera made Zeus swear an oath, because she was kind of a ruthless woman, or goddess, I should say, that a child of Perseus's descent would be the king of Tiryns. And Zeus was like, sure thing, no problem there. Because Perseus, a descendant of Perseus, would also be a descendant of Zeus. So this new baby being born would definitely count for that. But Hera schemed a little scheme here. She had the goddess of childbirth, Ilithyia, hold back the birth of Hercules and his twin brother. And while the birth goddess, Ilithyia, was busy, Hera would force the birth of another from Perseus's line. And this would be someone who I will name later, but this child would be born first, therefore proclaimed king of Tiryns. But don't forget, Hercules was being held by the childbirth goddess during this whole debacle, and this went on for a few days is what it sounded like in the research I was doing. So a wise and cunning servant of Alcmene tricked Ilithyia into being distracted, and into the world came the twins Hercules and his fully mortal twin brother Iphicles. So this is the kind of stuff that the Greeks would talk about with a lot of their lore, is these weird little blips and blurbs all over the place. And I will go over various Greek gods. Ilithyia is one that is rather new to me. I didn't realize there was a full-blown goddess dedicated exclusively to childbirth. So this is going to be an interesting rabbit hole we fall down when we really start digging into the Greek gods and goddesses. My thought on this, just sidetrack here, is to try to stick with the primary Olympians. In the Greek pantheon, there were a large list of gods and goddesses, but my thought, especially with the series I'm doing here, and what I want to do with my channel, is I want to stick with the primary deities. So some side quests like Alithia and a few of these other ones, I'm okay with adding in, but I do kind of want to stick with the primary heads, Zeus and Hera and Athena and Apollo, and like the main groups, because there's so many, especially the way Zeus was. There are so many demigods, some that were elevated to full deities, but they weren't part of the 12 Olympians, basically the children of the Titans or Kronos. So that's my goal, is I want to stick with the primaries. We'll add in the side characters at a later date. And I'm not doing a kombucha tonight, so that's a little weird. But I am doing the GT's Alive, and this is the root beer flavored one. And if you don't want to drink soda, honestly, I'm not sponsored, just this is something I enjoy drinking. This actually tastes like genuine root beer. It's not as bubbly, so I wouldn't probably use it as a root beer float, but it does taste good. And it's got an interesting mix of like mushroom blends. This one, what does it say? I think it's got like reishi and chaga, turkey tail, things like that. So it's a little different, but it's good. Back to the story. Sorry, little distraction. So the name Hercules, which is what the original name was, Herakles, commonly we use the Roman term Hercules today, but the name Heracles was an interesting name because it was basically the title of glorious gift of Hera, is how the word loosely or basically interprets. And so this is where we get things a little bit more interesting. We're going to bring in another goddess just real quick here because she's a side character to this story. She's a main character later, but when Alchemy birthed the children, she did name one Hercules or Heracles and Iphicles. So that's cool, but Alchemy realized that Hera was not happy. I mean, you could probably hear Olympus just rumbling in fury. So she exposed Hercules as the divine child of Zeus to her patron, or at least a friend of her patron, who is Athena, another goddess. And Athena plays a pretty important role through the 12 labors, so there's some importance here. Athena knew that this babe would need divine milk to grow healthy and strong, so Athena would bring an orphaned baby to Hera. Why? I'm still lost on that part. But that's the storyline here. So Hera, and this was strange because Hera's not the type to usually feel pity for infants, felt pity for this orphaned baby and brought him to her breast to suckle. Athena tricked Hera into nursing Hercules, the child she swore to destroy. I'm sorry, but I just think this is hysterical. And so Hercules latched on and started drinking. And this didn't exactly go super well for Hera, because Hercules, being a very strong baby, sucked on Hera's chest to the point where Hera was in pain and agony and flung the baby away from her. Athena, of course, would catch said child, so there was no damage. And Athena would then flee Olympus to take the baby back to Alcmene to be raised properly. But now he had a full belly of divine goddess milk, so he was set for a while. And one thing that I thought was kind of funny is it is said that the Milky Way galaxy bar across the sky, when you look up at the sky you can see the Milky Way, that are the drops of milk that sprayed forth from Hera when she shoved the baby away. So baby flies off, milk sprays across the sky, now we have the Milky Way galaxy, which I thought was kind of fun, weird, but fun. And there's other myths that we'll talk about later on that do describe different ways that the Milky Way showed up, but this is one of the Greek styles, ways. So again, still fun. And definitely goes along with that concept of Milky Way. Where are we at here? So, how do you think Hera felt when it dawned on her what had just happened? Child she swore to destroy. Athena brought said child to her under a fake story. She fed the child and then find out that the child was actually named as a gift from her. She was so mad at Zeus that basically I'm pretty sure Olympus was just rocking with her fury for months, if not years. Not only, and think about this is how pissed she was. Not only was her husband messing around on her and birthing all these random children and then picked this one to be his favorite, now there's this demigod baby who's favored by her husband, and she nursed the very thing that she wanted to destroy. I could not imagine how furious she was. And to top it all off, to have the child named after her as a gift from her, yeah. Furious doesn't quite describe, I think, how this goddess was acting. And at that point, she vowed to do everything in her power to end the life of Heracles, or Hercules. So, fun fact, and this is where we get into the Perseus aspect, or tie Perseus into the story. Hercules was actually the younger half-brother of Perseus, another of Zeus's many children. As I said before, Zeus had some issues, but it was said that Hercules was the favorite of all of Zeus's children by his father. Perseus we'll discuss later because he has an amazing story and life as well. And there's a little bit of interesting story ties with that. Some people say that Perseus was actually never born of Zeus. Others I've seen say that he was born of Zeus but was not a full demigod. But we'll get into him later. But he's another pretty fascinating one. Another one where the Greeks talked vastly about him, and many stories and today movies have been made about him. So, but that's for a later date. Speaking of, let's introduce our cast of characters. So, philandering father, here's Zeus, god of lightning, god of thunder, very promiscuous, very fertile, but he also had some very interesting divine characteristics with him. So that's who the father figure is here. And this is Hera. I purposely picked a nice picture of her because in part 2, in a couple of weeks, I'll explain why I still don't like Hera as a whole. But there's some things that change with her later on that we're going to be nice to her for now. Maybe not always. When I go do a full talk about Hera, that may change. But for now, we're going to be nice. So this was an ancient Greek statue of Hera. And we'll hop back into our story. And this is one of the parts where Hera's not so nice. Hera first, after she vowed to destroy said child again, Hera sent two poisonous serpents into the baby's crib, Hercules and Iphicles' crib. Hercules, it is said, strangled both snakes before they could bite him or his brother, and when the nanny came in to check on the babies because she heard a ruckus, she found Hercules playing with 2 dead snakes. Well, Hera was beside herself because baby, snake, easy, no, Hercules powerful, even as infant. So, this did not calm Hera down. Might made her a little bit more angry and a little bit more crazy for a minute. But there's a reason that she couldn't outright just make a move against Hercules and end him at that moment. And to me, this is kind of a simple, this is the duh factor concept. Zeus was the most powerful of the Olympian gods. So powerful, it is said, that they all would pay tribute to him because if he was furious, you were done. That quick, no thoughts. You would either be banished, destroyed, when I say banished, you were sent to Tartarus, where his brother Hades would torture you for all eternity, which is also where the Titans were stored. So you don't really want to go to Tartarus as an Olympian. But he was the most powerful one. He was the reason that Kronos vomited up his children. That was Zeus. And there's a lot more that goes on with Zeus we'll talk about later. But he was the most powerful of the Olympian gods, the most revered of all Olympus. Hera would never, no matter how mad she was about what he was doing, she would never move against that, because she knew she couldn't survive that if he turned on her. So that was part one. Part two, Hercules carried his father's great power with some human limitations, so it was not going to be an easy feat to destroy this child, even as a child. This was not going to be a feat that she was just going to walk up and be like, I'm going to end Hercules. No, you're not. No, you're not. And the third aspect, Hercules was the favored of Zeus. Out of all of Zeus's children, Hercules was his favorite, therefore the most protected and most observed. And honestly, out of the demigods and children of Zeus, Hercules garnered the most favor with the rest of Olympus. So Hera was not popular in her hatred of Hercules, so to move outright against Hercules would basically mean that she was going on a one-way trip to Tartarus, or possibly even worse, things that she didn't want to deal with. So she had to be very careful, and they all knew she was doing this. This is not a hit, it was like a open secret. They all knew, but she wasn't making moves herself. She was using patsies, so they were more okay with what was going on. They didn't like it, but they weren't going to fight too much about it unless Zeus stepped in. And since Hercules survived her several attempts on his life, snakes being number one, she vowed, if I can't kill you, I'm going to make your life a living hell. And she followed through on this promise. Now, was Hercules just a tortured soul his entire life? No. Hercules actually would grow into a very handsome and powerful young man, and a great warrior of his day, such as this. This is actually with him and the Nemean lion, but, you know, he was not an unattractive person, very powerful in his own right, because he was the child of a god. What would you expect, right? And it is said he was a great lover. It is also said that no woman, or for that matter, no man, could resist his charms. He was, to say that, put it mildly, he was very accomplished in the bedroom, and something, which, whatever, that's, you do you, especially back in the Greek days. And all I have to say to that is, apple doesn't fall very far from the proverbial tree, now does it, Zeus? How many kids did you have? In how many different forms? Just saying, he wasn't opposed to changing his shape to a different animal. Hercules was known to be the defender of mankind against all kind of monsters, and this was something that the Greeks played up a lot in their stories. Monsters from the abyss, from Echidna and Typhon, all these different other creatures that basically made our lives hell. He took care of them. And it is said that with his life, he actually made the world safe for mankind to flourish. So carried out Zeus's original plan, basically, is what it kind of plays out as. But outside of the hero, warrior, and lover aspects, Hercules was also known to be a very happy and goofy character. He was known to train with the youth, and also train the youth, in wrestling, gymnastics, the Olympic-style sports. He would also relax with all sorts of games, board games, games of wit and thought. He just enjoyed life. He was very free, fun-loving, and just overall enjoyed his existence. And that's something that is said about several of the Greek Olympians, Zeus being a primary one. He did carry the weight of everything on his shoulders to a certain extent, but he also liked to have fun. He wasn't opposed to being frivolous, and frivolity was something he was okay with. And so that's where we get into this more of this mess with Hercules. So, with all that divinity in his veins, and he was known to be very intelligent and cunning, tying into how he was raised and everything else we've already discussed. And this kind of shows up in the 12 labors that we've already talked about, how he was able to eventually, end the Hydra, how he was able to clear the entirety of the stables in a single day, all these little things that for the common person would have been overwhelming, but for Hercules, this was just another day. It wasn't super, it was special, but to him it was like, how do I solve this in whatever time period? And it's also how he ended up making a lot of money back from things, especially with the stables. So over time, before we get into the 12 labors level, Hercules, in all of his antics, met and fell in love with a young lady by the name of Megara. And if you watch the Disney version, that would be Meg. And they ended up having 2 bouncing babies. Now, I couldn't find exact references to boy, girl, how that all went. Most of the references I found were just to 2 children. And at this point, this is all we need for the story. And it's that young love and everyone's happy and there's 2 youngins in the household now, super cool. But we don't this is Hercules, and Greek myths do not always have a happily ever after, and this is definitely not a happily ever after. Hera, sitting on her throne in Olympus, fuming that Hercules was even still alive, let alone, succeeding at life. She watched Hercules get married, have the kids, and her cold, angry heart got darker and deader. Until one day, and it's not said how she did this exactly, but she sent a wild madness upon Hercules. Like I said, not being exactly ruthless today, I'm trying to be nice, because at the end of Hercules' story, there are some things about Hera that I do want to bring forward and highlight. Right now, this girl, big problems. Big problems. Not a fan, just in general. Right now, really not liking her. And in the madness that was sent from Hera, Hercules would hallucinate, see visions of demons and such, and would go after his wife and his 2 babies. In which case, in one evening of insane madness, he would end the life of Meg and the children. He lost everything he loved in one night, and he didn't even know it yet. It would take a few days to have other demigods and gods step in, and they would eventually bring him back to his senses by using a poisonous plant called hellebore. Just for future reference, or side note, whatever you want to call it, almost every single species out of the 22 are toxic in a major way. There's like 1 or 2 that won't kill you just from, they're not good plants. But he was a demigod, so one thing cancels another type of a thing. And when he finally came back to himself and realized what he had done, he was horrified. Can't even imagine how that would feel. I can hear Hera cackling from her throne in Olympus, but how Hercules felt, I don't ever want to experience that, and no one ever should, to be brutally honest with you. That would be hell in a way that you just can't get away from it. He was heartbroken and overall felt tainted by his crimes, and so he sought out Apollo and begged Apollo to take away his crime. Apollo had a lot of hats, so we'll get into Apollo later, but this is part of what he could do. He begged for forgiveness, Hercules did, from his madness for the murders and the insanity that he had done. He wanted to cleanse his soul of the evil that he had committed, even though he wasn't in his right mind when it happened. The guilt was just destroying him. I'm sure Hera was cackling about that too. Hercules would go to the temple of Apollo at Delphi to visit the oracle. We'll talk about her because the oracle of Delphi was a powerful oracle. It is said that anything that she spoke would come true. She had a direct connection to Apollo. There's also a little scandal that goes along with that, but we'll go over that when we talk about the oracle. Apollo, as I said before, had many hats. Knowing the future was one. Being able to help mortals atone for sin was another one, or atone for crimes. The concept of sin wasn't really a Greek thing at that moment, but that's what he was capable of doing. And his temple at Delphi was renowned for the prophecies that came from the oracles that resided there. So from here, is a little fracture in our storyline. So we'll talk about both versions of the story. The first one, which is, we'll just say that this is one of the stories. I'm not going to put my opinion on this one. The oracle advised Hercules, channeling Apollo, to have that he would have to complete 10 heroic tasks to free himself from the crimes that he had committed. That number eventually would become 12 because of Hera's machinations. Those 2 extra labors were because of the cleaning of the Augean stables when he diverted the river to flood out the stables, but he also received a payment of cows for that task. Eurystheus was furious that Hercules got paid and tried to cancel that labor, having that labor not count for the 10. Joke's on him, still counts, we talk about it today. The other was the killing of the Lernaean Hydra, since Hercules had help from his nephew Aeolus, cauterizing the stumps of the Hydra heads as Hercules lopped them off. So both of those were classified as cancelled by Eurystheus, which is how we end up with 12 labors later on. The replacement tasks, again, we've already talked about these in previous videos, were the capture of Cerberus, and I went over an entire video of Cerberus by himself, so you can go check that out if you'd like. But the other one was the Ladon dragon, who guarded the apples of Hesperides, and I spelled that completely wrong on my notes, and I just noticed that, which is impressive that I remembered how to say that name altogether. There we go. Sorry. But the Ladon dragon, like I said, we talked about before. The apples of Hesperides were the golden apples that Hera had given Zeus. It was an orchard of them, and this one particular dragon guarded the apples, and the Hesperides were also the guardians of the forest of golden apples. So those were the replacement tasks, and I think it was just Hera trying to be ruthless and, oh, I bet you can't get Cerberus out of Tartarus. Yeah, you can. Okay, you think that's hard? Go after the apples. Go after the apples that the Hesperides guard with the Ladon dragon protecting them. See how well you do there. Well, he did it. So there's a catch to this set of actions. The oracle told Hercules, this was in the story where the oracle's channeling Apollo, that he would have to go to Tiryns to perform these tasks and approach the king that lived there. And this is where I want to bring our attention back to why this king is important. This is the Hera simp. This is King Eurystheus. Mentioned his name just a minute ago. This particular king had a horrible reputation. He was known to be cruel and basically evil. And he was also very inventive in his evil. So, King Eurystheus, as I said earlier in the video, there was a baby that was being born of Perseus's line that Hera forced the birth, preventing Hercules from being born first. That baby was actually Eurystheus. So Eurystheus is a distant cousin, nephew, however you want to look at that, to Hercules. So there's some family drama going on behind the scenes here, and Hera was stirring this pot pretty hard. So, anyway, Apollo told Hercules that he had to go serve the king Eurystheus for 12 years to purge his sins and to perform 10 heroic labors within that time. Apollo had good news, though, and I thought this was pretty awesome. If Hercules could complete all 10 heroic tasks within the 12-year period, he would become immortal and live amongst the gods of Olympus. Basically, he would shed his mortal half and take on the full aspect of a full god instead of a demigod. The other version of this is that Hercules would flee to the temple of Apollo in Delphi, but instead of the oracle channeling Apollo, Hera blocked the channel's access to Apollo, and she spoke through the channel herself. Hera wanted to further torture Hercules and sent him to his cousin or nephew, or however that family tie works there, to perform the acts of contrition through the heroic labors. Everything else is pretty much the same. After the 12 years, you become immortal if you complete all tasks, blah, blah, blah. But it was sent from Hera, not Apollo. Honestly, I think that Apollo intervened by the end of that and was like, listen here, back off. I will finish this up. And that's where my personal opinion, he was the one that set the immortal live amongst the gods aspect of it, kind of like pushing Hera out of the way at that point. Like, you're not using my oracle, get out of here. So up to this point, just so we're all clear, Hercules was a demigod, son of Zeus, but he was a long-lived mortal man with supernatural powers. And it is from this point, when he left the Oracle of Delphi, he would travel to the land of Tyrannus, and he would approach King Eurystheus. And that is where we enter into the 12 laborers that we went over in like 8 to 10 videos because I went out of order on some of them. For that, I do apologize, but that's where that goes. Now, there are a lot, and I do mean a lot, of crazy stories about Hercules' life, different other heroic deeds that he did, how he tied into different other groups, which when you look at the time frames, we're starting to get into this. How long did this dude really live? And we're going to go over a lot of that and fill in some other blanks that might need to be filled in. I'm going to double check my 12 labors, make sure everything's cleaned up there, and then we'll continue from 12 labors forward in the next episode of Myth and Tarot. So it'll be a couple of weeks or so. And Myth and Tarot, just as a reminder for programming, is on the 2nd and 4th Mondays of each month at 7:30 Mountain Standard, or Mountain, whatever, we're in Daylight Savings Time, so that, whatever that is. And so if you're interested in hearing more about Hercules or any other myth and lore, we'll go over some of that later. That's the reason I'm also not going to be doing a tarot reading today for Hercules, because I do want to finish out his life. There was a lot more that goes on after he completes the 12 labors. And then I'll also kind of, in the next episode, discuss a little bit about the continuity that gets a little messed up here. I'm going to stick with a baseline version as I understand it, but I will point out where things don't quite line up. There is a couple of theories that the 12 labors were actually towards the end of Hercules' mortal existence. That doesn't quite fit with why he did the 12 labors, because after the 12 labors, there's a whole different set of things that occur. So that's some of those discrepancies I want to make sure that I have a little bit more clarified when we meet again for the next episode. So with that, we're just going to go ahead and wrap this one up. It's not as long as some of the other ones are, but if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, drop a like if you enjoyed this type of content, and comment down below. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas up until the 12 labors and through the 12 labors. If there's anything that I didn't pick up on or didn't point out that were major players, the little stuff when it comes to the stories, I'm not going to be focusing on, like, oh, well, this side quest where it took a day and nothing really important, no moral lessons or anything. I'm not probably going to talk about those. But if there's anything else that I have missed or left out, let me know, because I will correct it in the following episode. With that, I will let you guys go. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you in the next video. Where's my button?